To Mark's
Red rum.
Murder
Red rum.
Mystery
Red rum.
Monday.
It's not the same without the scream, Courtney. We just have to.
I know.
Yeah.
I was actually that was a really good open prior to this segment's open. That sort of buffer music, that was really great. It was so many fun drops. I mean, I'm really carrying Mark's mom, and yeah, it's really great. I should listen to the show, really.
Yeah, a little more often sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark will be back tomorrow. It's a perfect time to join in.
Exactly.
No, we're actually grateful to have you here.
Thanks.
Are you taking us to ancient Rome? What's going on, Courtney?
So we, Mark is not the biggest fan of murder per se. I'm not necessarily a fan of murder. I'm more a fan of true crime. But so we've been exploring other stories to talk about that are more focused on criminal activity, perhaps, than like murders per se. And so I was listening to a podcast called Criminalia, and I heard this story and I just thought it was so interesting. And so we're going to talk about Herostratus today. And I think some of the audience might know Herostratus because it's a fairly referenced sort of contemporary subplot or character in a lot of movies and books and plays, often serving as like a character, as I mentioned, or even like a subplot. And so when I saw this story, I thought, oh, this is great. We have to talk about this. So Herostratus was a man who lived in ancient Greece during the 3rd century. He actually died in 356 BC, but he burned down a very famous temple in an attempt to create infamy or be notorious and have his name live on well past his death. And so he devised this plan to burn down this temple in an effort to do that. And so
I'm just going to say for a second, it looks like he was succeeded in that effort because here we are still talking about this guy.
I know, right? I mean, just as he planned, his name lives on in podcasts all over the world 3,000 years later.
It's a wild idea, but it just might work.
It's funny. It's interesting.
It's a wild idea, but it just might work.
Exactly. To that point, he does live on, and he sort of sidestepped a law that was put into place where people couldn't mention his name, and I'll get to that. But in fact, his name is more widely referenced, even beyond the judges who gave him not only the death penalty, but this sentence in and by which nobody could mention his name publicly or even privately as an effort to not give him the notoriety and the infamy that he was looking for in burning down this temple. So Herostratus devises a plan to burn down the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. Now, if I mispronounce anything, I apologize up front. And so he does this. He does this on July 21st, year is 356 BC. It's actually the same night that Alexander the Great was born. And many of the ancient Greecians thought that Artemis was distracted with the birth of Alexander the Great and therefore couldn't defend her temple. And the temple had been on land that had been used since the Bronze Age, which is like 3300 BC to 1200 BC. And the first temple of Artemis was actually destroyed during a flood in the 7th century BC. And so they erected the second temple. And this is the one that Herostratus burned down. It's said that it took 100 years to build this temple, and it was larger than a football field. But part of the temple was marble, and then another part of the temple was wood. And so Herostratus goes and he burns down the wood portion of this temple, and effectively the temple burns to the ground. He actually stays at the temple. So when they come to react to the fire, he's there and he's proclaiming, I did this and I did this so that my name will live on in infamy and I will be notorious far beyond my death. And so then they say to him, bad idea, we're arresting you. And he's not only tortured, but he's sentenced to death. And the entire time he's admitting to doing it. And he's admitting to the reasons why he did it. And so he ends up, being, he's ultimately killed for what he did in burning down this temple. The temple was actually recognized as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So it really was a very well-known temple for its time. And it lives on as that. Although there's a picture in here where you can see, these are, if you're watching, these are illustrations of what the temple might have looked like. Yeah. But the contemporary experience in going to where the temple is it leaves a lot to be desired. It's like a single pillar and then a smaller pillar as well there. It's right there. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. But as you're standing there looking at the ruins, you get to hear this really interesting crime story, right?
Yeah.
That's not fake. That's real.
Exactly. It's fun. There's interesting, like there was it's now in modern day Turkey. It's in the western part of modern day Turkey. And there's a gentleman that went to visit it, and he was writing in his blog, he was so angry that he had gone to see the Temple of Artemis, and like, this is all that was standing. And I think that he wasn't realizing this massive story behind the history of like why these ruins are the way that they are, which is in fact the Herostratus story.
I wonder if he was the first person to achieve the notoriety for committing a crime to achieve notoriety. You know, because now we have people all the time, they open fire because they want their name remembered, or, you know, whatever ridiculous reason. Yeah. But I wonder if he was the first to just burn something down just because he wanted to be remembered for that. And what a thing to want to be remembered for, right?
I know, right? I mean, yeah, it seemed poorly conceived from the beginning, this plot. But I don't think he was. There, in his sentencing, they created something called the Damnatio Memoriae. And I think it actually predated him, but it was basically a law forbidding anyone to mention his name orally or in writing. And anybody that was living in Ephesus wouldn't do that. They did not mention him. They would not speak of him. But there were other people in ancient Greece who did not live in that area who talked about and wrote about him. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Herostratus's name lives on because of some of the ancient Grecian historians that were, you know, talking about what was happening during that time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that there was something in place where people that were doing horrible crimes, Nero, I think, was actually one of the first people to be given this in an effort to not give them that notoriety that they were looking for. And so I also, it reminded me too of like contemporary culture, not in as horrific a way, but like the whole TikTok generation, like, yeah, like people that are doing things, even if they're small crimes or things that might hurt themselves or others, to get that content on, to find followers. It's a really interesting thing that existed 3,000 years ago. And then obviously today in sort of like the contemporary use of technology. So
people want to make their mark. They want to be remembered, right? But what do you want to be remembered for? And I guess if you have no skills to contribute to humanity or to the world, if you have no scientific breakthroughs or inventions or art or something of note, then you look for, well, what bad thing could I do? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I think that, sometimes we're compelled by certain things, whether it's, you know, a need for something or an interest in something. And so perhaps that compulsion or that interest, you know, gets us into situations that aren't necessarily always good or beneficial. And certainly that is the case here. But it certainly reminded me of sort of like also just contemporary serial killers and some of the things that we talk about on the show, wherein people are doing things, again, to create that notoriety. It's called herostratic fame. And so sometimes you'll hear that referenced, and that is, of course, doing a criminal act to achieve notoriety. But a lot of contemporary authors as well have talked about Herostratus, Chaucer, Herman Melville. Gore Vidal mentions it's the story within one of his novels, Two Sisters. Also, in the 2018 film Assassination Nation, there's actually a hacker whose handle is Herostratus, like sort of misspelled. And in that plot line, the hacker leaks all of this town's personal information for the LOLs, and sending the town into a frenzy. So it really is like something that unfortunately lives on, but is used, as I mentioned before, in many ways in contemporary literature and film as a subplot or a character line. So yeah.
John Watson writes that some men just want to watch the world burn down.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. It is true. This is Herostratus, the film. This is Helen Mirren, actually, on the right-hand side.
Oh,
it's the
wow.
first film that she's,
How young
in.
she looks. I mean, she is.
I know. Yeah, it's true.
I would never have even recognized her if you hadn't said that.
Yeah, I know. I saw it, and I thought she's so beautiful. And then I saw it, I was like, wow, she definitely looks so young. So yeah, this is from 1967. But as I mentioned, it's something that lives on. Yeah. So
Joe says it's a new word for him, her, I think her, and it's a new word for me too. So you taught us something today, Courtney. Very impressive.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I enjoy so much being invited here, and I thought this was a really interesting story. So I'm glad that, perhaps we'll find it again in one of the stories coming up. But I'm really glad that people connected with it because I thought it was interesting.
Well, we walk away from Mark's Murder Mystery Monday with you, Courtney, smarter. And so thank you for that. And you are always welcome here. So grateful to have you. Yeah,
thank you
absolutely.
So much.
All right,
you and Albert, so nice to have me. I know Mark's not, but he's coming back tomorrow. So,
yeah, he'll be back tomorrow. And hopefully we'll see you next Monday.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Courtney.
Bye.
Mark's Murder Mystery Monday on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.